Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back thousands of years into the land of pyramids and pharaohs. Imagine the warm Egyptian sun already creeping through the cracks in a mud brick house. A few dust motes dancing in the beam of light that lands right across your eyes. You're not royalty, not a soldier, not a priest with flashy ceremonies. No, you're a scribe, one of the ink-stained clerks of ancient Egypt. That means your weapon isn't a spear or a chisel, it's a reed pen, which is somehow both less glamorous and, in its own way, far more powerful. Of course, don't get too comfortable in this role. You probably wouldn't actually survive the heat, the bugs, or the bread that tastes suspiciously like sandpaper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening while tucked into bed, I'd love for you to drop a quick comment with your location and the local time where you are. It's fun seeing this little community stretch across time zones, almost like we're all scribes leaving our marks on the same scroll. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins before dawn, because Egypt's heat isn't particularly forgiving. You push yourself up from your reed mat, stiff in your back, but grateful the night's cooler air at least made sleep possible. The mat scratches just a little, because comfort wasn't exactly a priority in your mud brick quarters. The floor is packed earth, smoothed over from years of walking barefoot across it. It's quiet, except for the faint sound of donkeys braying somewhere in the distance, and the sharp caw of a crow perched on the roof. You rub your eyes, sticky from sleep, and the first thing you notice is the light seeping through the cracks in the walls. Mud brick homes were sturdy enough, but they were never airtight. A breeze sneaks in, carrying with it the smell of dust and, if you're unlucky, the faint tang of manure from the nearby streets. The roof above you is made of palm logs and reeds, and if you look closely, you can actually see little flakes of straw dangling down, threatening to fall on your face at any moment. You stretch, your joints clicking a little louder than you'd like to admit, and you reach for the linen kilt folded neatly beside your mat. It's simple, nothing grand, white, lightweight, and designed to handle the sweltering day ahead. Egyptian linen was prized for being airy and cool, and while your garment isn't top-tier pharaonic fashion, it does the job. You tie it around your waist, and for a moment you're grateful that being a scribe spares you from the heavier outfits worn by soldiers or the layers priests sometimes pile on. In the corner, there's a small clay jar with water from the Nile. It's not sparkling clean, let's be honest. There's a reason Egyptians often drank beer instead. But you dip your hands in and splash your face anyway. The water is shockingly cool compared to the air, a refreshing jolt that makes you gasp softly. Hygiene here is surprisingly important. You'll wash not just your face, but also your hands. Maybe even brush your teeth with a chewed stick of palm fiber if you're feeling fancy. Egyptians liked smelling pleasant too, which means you reach for a small jar of oil infused with something herbal, lotus, or maybe frankincense if you're lucky. You dab it along your neck and arms, both to moisturize and to ward off the less glamorous scent of sweat. And yes, here's the quirky bit, if you were wealthy enough or eccentric enough, you might even smear crocodile dung as sunscreen. Some ancient texts suggest it was believed to offer protection from the blazing sun. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely practical or more symbolic. Either way, you decide to skip the crocodile dung today because, well, you'd like your coworkers to sit within 10 feet of you. As the household stirs awake, you hear muffled voices through the thin walls, neighbors greeting each other, the clatter of pots being set down, and a rooster that seems to think it's being paid to scream at exactly the wrong moment. Life in an Egyptian village or town is communal. The walls might divide houses, but sound travels easily. Privacy, as we understand it now, isn't exactly part of your world. A low wooden stool, a basket filled with scraps of linen, and in the corner, your precious writing kit. Even here at home, you sometimes bring work back, like a scholar obsessed with finishing just one more column of hieroglyphs. There's a small wooden palette smeared with dried black and red ink and a bundle of reed pens cut to a sharp point. You'll tuck it all into a leather pouch before leaving for the scribal school, but for now, it's a comforting reminder of your role in society. And make no mistake, your role matters. Egypt doesn't function without scribes. Farmers grow the grain, sure, but who counts the harvest? Priests bless the rituals, yes, but who records the prayers so they aren't forgotten? Soldiers guard the borders, but who drafts the lists of rations they need? That's you, ink-stained fingers and all. Still, the morning is your own, for a moment. You slip outside, blinking against the sudden brightness. The sun has fully risen, spilling across mud brick streets that glow a soft reddish hue. Chickens dart across the path in front of you, clucking indignantly, and a child runs past barefoot, chasing after a hoop made of bent reed. You smell baking bread from a neighbor's oven, the kind fueled by dry dung patties, smoky, pungent, and oddly comforting because it means breakfast is near. Your stomach growls, reminding you that barley bread is waiting. It won't be soft or fluffy. It's coarse, filled with husks, and will probably leave grit between your teeth. Still, dipped into a small bowl of honey or washed down with beer, it does the trick. That meal belongs to the next part of your day, though, so for now, you savor the anticipation. One last stretch, one last splash of cool water over your neck, and you're ready to face the hours ahead. Today, like every day, will blur together in ink and parchment with moments of gossip, laughter, and maybe even a little frustration when the reed pen splinters at the wrong time. For now, you're just a scribe, standing barefoot in the early light, wondering if the gods smile on you for choosing ink over sword. You settle back inside for the little routines that shape your morning, because a scribe's mind needs a body that's at least halfway presentable. That clay basin of Nile water stares at you again, waiting. You kneel beside it and scoop another handful over your arms, rubbing away the fine layer of dust that somehow manages to coat everything overnight. Egyptians valued cleanliness almost as much as they valued order, which is saying something in a society that built its entire worldview around balance and harmony, what they called ma'at. You reach for a strip of natron, the naturally occurring salt mixture Egyptians used for washing, deodorizing, and, if you believe the embalmers, turning bodies into shriveled raisins for eternity. You rub it between your hands, the gritty texture a little harsh, but effective at cutting through sweat. The smell it leaves is sharp, almost mineral, and while you wouldn't call it pleasant, you'd take it any day over the ripe scent of unwashed neighbors. After drying off, you fetch your little jar of scented oil again. This time you rub it into your scalp, slicking your short-cropped hair flat. Many scribes shaved their heads completely to avoid lice, but you've kept yours short and neat, a sort of compromise between vanity and practicality. The oil softens your skin, makes the air shimmer faintly with lotus and myrrh, and doubles as insect repellent, because mosquitoes do not care that you are an essential part of pharaonic bureaucracy. Next comes your eyes. Not because you're vain, but because Egyptian sun and sand are merciless. You open a small pot of powdered malachite, the green mineral ground down and mixed with oil. Using your fingertip, you smear a thin line beneath your eyes. It's not just decoration, though it does look striking. This liner actually helps reflect the glare of the sun and deters flies. Later in the day, you might switch to galena, the black coal more famously associated with Egyptian art. Historians still argue whether the antibacterial properties of coal were intentional medicine or just a happy accident of fashion. Either way, you're grateful for it when a swarm of gnats decides your eyeballs look like a landing strip. And here's where the quirky tidbit of crocodile dung makes its cameo again. A neighbor passing by your doorway is smearing a thick, earthy paste on her arms, convinced it will keep her from burning under Ra's blistering eye. You try not to wrinkle your nose too obviously, it's rude after all, but you also make a mental note to stick to shade and linen instead of experimenting with, well, that.
You tug at your kilt, smoothen the linen folds so they fall neatly. A little belt at your waist keeps it snug, and you slip a small amulet under the waistband, a carved scarab that supposedly brings protection and luck. Superstition runs deep here, and while you may spend your day calculating grain rations with neat columns of numbers, you're not about to tempt fate by going amulet-free. As you adjust the scarab, you glance at the doorway where a sliver of morning sun now floods in, catching the floating dust motes like tiny golden sparks. The air smells faintly smoky, a reminder that ovens are already burning dung fuel for bread across the neighborhood. With your body somewhat refreshed and your protective charms in place, you turn to grooming tools. A copper razor, sharp but tricky to use, waits in a wooden box. You decide against a full shave today. You don't have time for nicks and the sting of natron rubbed into cuts. Instead, you run your hand along your chin and jaw, deciding that the stubble is short enough to pass. Many men in Egypt shaved fully, but scribes had some leeway. As long as you didn't look like a wandering desert hermit, you were fine. You do, however, pluck at your eyebrows a little with a pair of bronze tweezers. Egyptians, men and women, took grooming seriously. In fact, some tomb paintings show servants attending to personal hygiene tasks that, to modern eyes, might seem almost luxurious. You, unfortunately, have only your own steady hand, and you wince slightly as each hair gives way. The result, though, is neat. The gods and your colleagues will approve. Now, as you look at your reflection in the basin water, distorted but recognizable, you wonder, is this how every scribe began their day? Some certainly. Others may have rushed more, grabbing a reed pen with ink-stained fingers before even washing, especially if an overseer was barking orders about overdue scrolls. Historians still debate how strictly ordinary scribes followed elite customs of hygiene, since much of what survives in art reflects the ideals of the upper class. But whether your version is perfectly accurate or just aspirational, it makes you feel a little more human, and a little less like the mud and dust you sleep in. One last step. Beer and onions are a staple of your diet, which does not exactly make for fresh conversation. You chew on a twig of palm fiber, frayed at the end, brushing it along your teeth. It squeaks faintly, pulling grit from between molars, and leaves your mouth tingling in a not unpleasant way. You rinse with another splash of water, spit discreetly into the dirt outside, and exhale to test yourself. Not minty, not by a long shot, but tolerable. Good enough for dictating contracts and tallying wheat shipments. You step outside again, the sun now fully awake and already too bright for comfort. Your skin glistens slightly from the oil, your coal catches the light, and your linen feels airy against the breeze. You are, by Egyptian standards, clean and ready, armored not with bronze, but with salt, oil, and a little powder of crushed minerals. Your neighbor, the one with crocodile dung still clinging to her arms, waves and teases you. "All dressed up for the gods' paperwork again?" she calls. You smile, because yes, that's exactly your role, filing the cosmos into neat lines of ink. You wave back, resisting the urge to quip about her unusual skincare routine. The day is young, and jokes about crocodile dung are best saved for after lunch. As you adjust your satchel, you feel the weight of the writing kit against your side. The palette, the pens, the scrolls. The tools of your trade are humble, but they will carry you through endless contracts, prayers, and tallies. And right now, with your morning rituals complete, you feel prepared to face them. Even if, let's be honest, you'll end up smudging ink on your freshly washed hands before the first hour is out. Now comes the part your stomach has been growling for since you first stirred on that scratchy reed mat. Breakfast. It's not grand, no golden platters, no sweet cakes dripping with honey reserved for the nobility, but it's the fuel that keeps your hands steady and your mind sharp enough to wrangle the endless river of hieroglyphs awaiting you. You sit cross-legged near the low hearth, where yesterday's coals are coaxed back to life with a puff of breath and a fresh pat of dried dung fuel. Smoke curls lazily upward, leaving the air smelling earthy, pungent, and oddly reassuring. Bread is the foundation of Egyptian life, and so barley flour is kneaded into a heavy dough, sometimes flecked with sand that slipped in during the grinding process. You've long since accepted that the grit will slowly file down your teeth. Everyone's teeth here show the wear of a lifetime of bread that crunches faintly in ways it probably shouldn't. A flat loaf is slid into the dome-shaped clay oven, its surface blistering quickly in the heat. The smell fills the little house, warm and nutty, and your stomach answers with a loud protest that makes the neighbor's child outside giggle. You break the loaf open while it's still steaming, letting the soft middle balance out the tough crust. It isn't fluffy. Egyptian bread is dense, hearty, a meal in itself. To wash it down, there's beer. Not the hoppy, frothy kind you might imagine from modern bars, but a thick, porridge-like brew made from fermented barley and emmer wheat. It's cloudy, slightly sour, and full of chunks, almost like drinking liquid bread. To you, it's as natural as water, and safer too, given the Nile's tendency to gift you a bellyache if you drink it straight. You tip the jar and sip, the sour tang mixing with the warm bread in a combination that somehow works, even if it wouldn't win any awards today. Alongside the bread and beer, there's a small bowl of lentils, stewed until soft and flavored with garlic and a dash of coriander. A smear of honey sits in another dish, precious enough that you dip your bread sparingly, savoring the burst of sweetness as if it were treasure. If luck is on your side, a neighbor might share figs or dates, their sticky flesh adding a welcome note of variety. As you eat, conversation drifts in from the courtyard where your father sits on a low stool, knotting a broken basket handle back together. He grumbles about rising taxes, and your mother, never one to miss an opportunity, teases him that maybe their son, the scribe, could make the numbers look a little more generous. You nearly choke on your bread at that suggestion, shaking your head. Falsifying tax records is the kind of thing that gets you in very deep trouble, the sort of trouble where your reed pen is taken away permanently, along with your freedom. Still, the joke lands, and the family laughs before falling into a comfortable silence broken only by the clatter of bowls. This is where gossip creeps in. The neighbor from earlier pokes her head through the doorway, announcing that a farmer was seen arguing with the temple overseer about missing grain. Supposedly the scribes are involved, checking tallies. You nod, because of course they are. Scribes are always involved. If something is counted, measured, or disputed, a scribe's ink is in the middle of it. Whether it's fair or not is another question entirely. Historians still argue whether scribes were more loyal to their communities or to the bureaucracy that employed them. But over breakfast, it's just another story to mull over. Another tidbit of chatter makes the rounds. A new decree is rumored to be coming from the palace, something about labor conscription for maintaining irrigation canals. It's not confirmed yet, but everyone speculates. You choose slowly, imagining the long lines of men with baskets of mud, the shouted orders, the sweat dripping into the Nile. You won't be lifting mud yourself. You'll be the one jotting down how many baskets pass through. But that doesn't necessarily make you more popular with those who do the backbreaking work. Between bites, you find yourself staring at the family's cat. She has leapt silently onto the bench beside you, her golden eyes fixed on your bread with the unblinking intensity of a god. Cats here aren't just pets. They're protectors of grain stores, guardians against mice, and animals so revered that harming one could land you in serious trouble. You sigh and break off a small piece of bread, placing it on the floor. She sniffs, pretends indifference for a moment, then devours it. You know she'll expect the same tomorrow, and the day after, and forever. Cats have a way of training humans, even in ancient Egypt. By the time the bread is gone, your belly feels pleasantly heavy,
though not weighed down. You stretch your legs, brushing crumbs from your linen, and tip the last of the beer back. A small hiccup escapes, and you grin sheepishly. Beer before noon is nothing unusual here, but it still leaves a faint warmth in your chest. You rise to rinse your hands, dipping them once more in the water jar and rubbing them together briskly. The coolness refreshes you, cutting through the heat already building in the room. Outside, the streets are filling with more noise, donkeys braying, merchants shouting, sandals scuffing over the packed earth. You sling your satchel over your shoulder, the writing kit bumping against your hip, and step toward the day's work. But as you leave, you pause, savoring the aftertaste of barley and garlic still clinging to your tongue. Breakfast may be simple, but it is grounding. It connects you to every other scribe, farmer, and worker across the two lands who begins the day in the same way, with bread, beer, and the faint hum of gossip. A shared rhythm that keeps Egypt moving, one loaf at a time. Of course, tomorrow, the bread will taste just as sandy and the beer just as lumpy, but somehow you'll still look forward to it. Because in this world, routine is comfort, and comfort is rare. The meal behind you, the day ahead pulling like a slow tide, you step out into the street with your satchel bumping at your hip. The air is already warm, that dry kind of warmth that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy cloak. The Nile breeze drifts faintly through the alleys, carrying the mingled perfume of baked bread, manure, fish, and the sweet smoke of incense curling from a neighbor's doorway. Your feet slap softly against the packed dirt road as you move into the flow of morning life. The street is narrow, shaded by mud brick walls that lean toward each other like gossiping neighbors. Cracks in the plaster reveal the straw mixed into the clay, a reminder of how every wall in this town was sculpted by hand. Overhead, strips of linen hang on ropes, fluttering lazily in the breeze like flags marking the day's beginning. You have to keep your eyes open, literally, because the street is alive with motion. A donkey, stubborn and dusty, blocks half the path, its owner tugging at its reins while shouting words that would probably curl your reed pen if you wrote them down. You sidestep quickly, brushing against a wall just in time to avoid a boy sprinting past with a wooden hoop rolling ahead of him, his laughter bouncing down the street. Another child darts after him, clutching a stick, determined to keep the hoop upright. The thump-thump of bare feet fades as they turn a corner. The smell of onions hits you next. A vendor squats by a basket overflowing with them, calling out prices to passersby. He shouts louder when a woman tries to haggle, their voices weaving into the constant background hum of the town. You hear the clink of copper coins changing hands, followed by the sharper sound of clay jars knocking together. Another merchant rolls past a cart stacked with pottery, each jar wobbling precariously with every rut in the road. You give him a wide berth. One bad bump, and you'll be wearing clay shards to work. Animals claim their share of space too. A flock of geese waddles noisily through the street, flapping wings and hissing at anyone who dares block their march. You laugh softly as a young apprentice, arms full of scrolls, has to pause and let them pass like feathered royalty. He looks relieved when they finally scatter, though not before one nips his ankle in protest. You make a mental note. Even in ancient Egypt, geese are jerks. Somewhere ahead, the sound of a sistrum rattling in a shrine carries faintly on the air. A woman in crisp linen is offering incense to Hathor, her movements deliberate and graceful. You bow your head slightly as you pass. Respect for the gods is stitched into every moment here, even the walk to work. Still, you can't help but notice the children sneaking curious peeks into the shrine before being shooed away by an irritated priest. The street widens into a small marketplace, and here the true rhythm of the city beats. Traders shout about fresh fish hauled from the Nile, their scales flashing silver in the sun before being wrapped in palm leaves. A man with baskets of dates calls out their sweetness, offering a free taste to anyone who slows down. You resist the temptation, though the sticky fruit would make a fine mid-morning snack. Beside him, a weaver shows off dyed linen in brilliant shades of red and blue, colors that make your own plain kilt feel drab. It's impossible not to notice how everyone eyes you differently once they spot your satchel. Farmers glance curiously, some with respect, some with suspicion. To them, your bag isn't just leather and reeds, it's a symbol of authority, of records that can shift their fortunes with a single stroke of ink. You feel the weight of those looks, the quiet knowledge that being a scribe places you between the ordinary bustle of the streets and the invisible machinery of bureaucracy. You pause to greet a neighbor sweeping her doorway, her broom little more than bound reeds. She asks if you've heard the rumor about new temple taxes. You shake your head, smiling politely, and she sighs dramatically. They'll have us paying for the priest's perfume next, she mutters. You chuckle, though carefully. You've learned not to take sides too loudly when it comes to taxes. People remember what scribes say, especially when numbers are involved. Moving on, you pass a group of men bent under baskets piled high with mud from irrigation ditches. Their backs shine with sweat, muscles taut, and for a moment you're struck by the contrast. Your hands will ache from writing today, not from hauling earth. A few of them shoot you a look that's hard to read, resentment maybe, or just exhaustion. Historians still argue whether scribes were loved for preserving order or loathed for enforcing it. As you continue walking, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. The smell of frying fish makes your stomach rumble again, even though breakfast wasn't long ago. You glance toward the stall where a woman is crouched over a shallow pan, sizzling tilapia in oil. She waves at you cheerfully, holding out a sample. You almost, but you shake your head with an apologetic grin. Work first, fish later. A donkey brays loudly behind you, startling you into a quick step aside. Its cart is loaded with jars sealed with mud caps, the unmistakable smell of beer seeping from them. The driver calls out that it's fresh from the brewery, ready for the temple. You wonder, as the cart lurches away, if the gods themselves would appreciate such lumpy brew. Probably. At last, the crowd thins as you near the scribal house. The noise of the market fades behind you, replaced by the rhythmic slap of sandals against the ground. The building rises ahead, its mud brick walls clean and imposing compared to the houses pressed together in the alleys. A few other scribes are already gathered at the doorway, clutching their own satchels, trading weary jokes about the day's assignments. You recognize some faces, fellow students, colleagues, rivals in the never-ending contest of neat handwriting. You straighten your kilt, adjust your satchel, and take a deep breath. The bustle of the streets still hums faintly in your ears, but here, at the edge of order and ink, you know your role awaits. Behind you are donkeys, merchants, and gossip. Ahead of you are scrawls, pens, and the endless stream of words that shape Egypt itself. And so you step forward, leaving the noisy morning streets behind, ready to unroll the papyrus and begin your day. Inside the scribal house, the first thing that hits you is not the sight of papyrus scrolls neatly rolled and tucked into niches along the wall. It's the smell. That blend of ink, old reed fibers, and human sweat lingers in the air like an invisible fog, familiar, yet never exactly pleasant. You breathe it in anyway, because it's the smell of your trade, the scent of order pressed into fibers. The room is shaded, its small windows letting in streaks of sunlight that fall across low benches. A faint draft drifts through the doorway, enough to stir the edges of loose papyrus sheets, but not enough to cool the room. The walls are plain, mud-plastered and bare, except for a few faint drawings where a bored apprentice scratched a hieroglyph into the surface years ago. The faint outline of an ibis, perhaps a clumsy nod to Thoth, patron god of scribes, peeks from one corner, watching you with its beak half chipped away. You set your satchel down on the bench, unfastening its ties carefully. Out come the tools of your profession, the reed pens, cut to sharp angles and polished smooth. The wooden palette smeared with dried cakes of ink, one black, one red, and a bundle of papyrus scrolls bound together with a strip of linen cord. Each piece feels like a friend, and each carries its own little irritations. The reed pens are deceptively simple. You pick one up, run your thumb along its tip, and notice the faint roughness. It will need trimming soon. You take a small knife from your pouch and slice the end at an angle, flicking away the shavings that scatter like straw. Too blunt and your lines will smear. Too sharp and the reed will scratch through the papyrus fibers, leaving ragged holes where words should be. You mutter under your breath, because no matter how many years you've practiced, the pen always seems to know when to betray you. Then there's the palette. Its two shallow wells hold cakes of ink. Black, made from soot mixed with water and gum, and red, mixed from ochre for headings, names, or important distinctions. You add a little water with a quick splash from a jar, stirring with the pen tip until the surface softens into a usable paste. Already your fingers are stained, a mark that every scribe carries. In this world, ink stains are like badges, proof that you belong to the guild of those who turn thoughts into symbols. The papyrus itself is rolled carefully, each sheet joined to the next by glue made of flour paste. When unrolled, the surface crackles faintly, rough under your palm. It's not uniform. Sometimes the fibers run unevenly, forcing your hand to compensate. You can always tell which sections were made in a hurry by an impatient craftsman. Papyrus making is its own art, cutting reeds, soaking, pressing, drying. You don't make it yourself, but you respect the process. Without it, your words would have nowhere to live. Around you, the scribal house hums with quiet activity. Apprentices mutter as they practice hieroglyphs, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm of repetition. One boy chants mouth, hand, sun, house, while carefully scratching their symbols into a scrap of broken pottery. Ostraca, those pottery shards, are everywhere, stacked in baskets along the walls. Papyrus is valuable. Mistakes are practiced first on shards that once held oil or beer. You remember your own days bent over such fragments, wrist aching, the master's stick tapping your shoulder when your lines strayed too wide. Today, though, you have real work. You pull open a scroll and lay it across the bench, smoothing the edges with both palms. The fibers sigh as they relax, curling faintly at the edges. You dip your reed into the black ink, letting it soak just enough to hold a drop. Then you set the tip against the papyrus, breathe out slowly, and begin. The first line flows clean, steady, precise. There's a deep satisfaction in seeing the crisp black strokes form into recognizable signs: an owl, a loaf, a zigzag line for water. Each is part of the vast vocabulary of hieroglyphs, symbols that carry both sound and meaning. Sometimes you pause, frowning at the little blot of ink that pools when your hand hesitates. You dab it quickly with a scrap of cloth, muttering to yourself. These little imperfections will never leave, and they remind you that even in a world obsessed with order, human hands tremble. A fellow scribe glances over, smirking at your struggle. You raise an eyebrow back, as if to say, wait until your reed splinters mid-sentence. The routine settles in. Dip, press, glide, lift, repeat. Black for the bulk of the text, red for the headings. Your body leans into the rhythm, shoulders hunched, elbow propped on the bench, eyes narrowing against the sunlight streaming through the window. Now and then you pause to flex your hand. Already the ache begins, that dull throb between thumb and wrist. Scribes learn early that their work is less about inspiration and more about endurance. Your hand is a tool as much as the reed pen is, and it needs rest. You roll your wrist in slow circles, listening to the faint pop of joints. Then back to the scroll. Always back to the scroll. And while you write, your mind drifts. You think about how fragile these words are, and yet how permanent. Papyrus can last centuries in the dry air of tombs. Somewhere in the future, long after you're gone, someone might unroll this very scroll and squint at your handwriting. Maybe they'll praise your neatness, maybe they'll curse you for smudges. Either way, your ink will outlive you. That thought sends a tiny shiver up your spine, comforting and eerie all at once. From the corner of the room comes a sudden clatter. An apprentice has dropped his ink jar, sending black streaks across the floor. The master of the house snaps his head up, glaring. The boy freezes, eyes wide, and then scrambles to wipe up the spill with a rag that only spreads the stain. A murmur of laughter ripples through the room, yours included, though quietly. You know that kind of mistake too well. Ink has a way of making itself at home on everything except the papyrus it's supposed to stay on. Back at your bench, you unroll another section of papyrus, smoothing the crease. This one is more brittle, and as you press too firmly with your reed, a small tear opens. You sigh, dipping a finger into the flour glue and patching it delicately. Your satchel always carries a little jar of glue for moments like this. Without it, half your scrolls would fall apart before they even left the scribal house. The sun has shifted now, the light cutting across your bench at a sharper angle. You realize with a jolt that hours have slipped by unnoticed. Time bends strangely when you're lost in ink, when the scroll stretches endlessly forward and your reed scratches a rhythm into its fibers. You pause, leaning back, letting your gaze drift around the room. Other scribes are hunched like you, lips moving silently as they copy prayers, contracts, lists. One is unrolling a scroll of accounts so long it trails across the floor like a coiled serpent. Another dips into red ink to highlight a pharaoh's name, careful not to smudge the sacred signs. It strikes you then, again, that this is your world. Not swords or plows or temples, but ink and papyrus. Tools that may look humble, but hold the weight of Egypt itself. And as you wipe your stained fingers on a rag, muttering about the stubborn smear that refuses to budge, you know tomorrow will be exactly the same. Another scroll, another reed, another smudge. The cycle is endless, yet oddly soothing. The morning advances, and with the scrolls unfurled before you, it's not long before the familiar drone of learning drills begins to fill the air. You glance toward the corner where a group of apprentices sit cross-legged on reed mats, each armed with a splintered shard of pottery and a reed pen that looks ready to collapse at the slightest pressure. Their master stands tall, staff in hand, not a weapon, but a pointer, though the sharp tap it makes against a wooden bench is enough to make every boy sit straighter. You remember when that was you? Days spent tracing the same hieroglyph over and over, each line judged too crooked, too short, too faint. The master would hover behind you, his breath a hot reminder of your mistakes. The sting of the stick across your shoulders came quickly if your wrist slackened. You rub your own arm as if the phantom strike still lingers. Historians still argue whether Egyptian education was harsh discipline or simply stern structure, but you know what it felt like. Endless repetition with the occasional bruise to drive the lesson home. Now, though, you're on the other side. You're not the trembling apprentice. You're the scribe with a seat at the bench, your scroll already dotted with neat lines. Still, the drills echo in your head like the chants of a temple hymn. Ankh, life. Jed, stability. Was, power. The words were more than words. They were symbols stitched into the fabric of Egypt itself. Learning them wasn't just about literacy. It was initiation into a world of meaning. You glance at the nearest apprentice, a boy barely 10, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he struggles to copy the owl glyph. His reed pen squeaks against the shard, leaving a blot that turns the poor bird into something closer to a melted goose. He groans softly, and the master swoops in, tapping the shard with his staff. The boy winces, but tries again, his little shoulders stiff with determination. You smile faintly. He'll get there, eventually. Your own hand, though more practiced, isn't immune to the strain. Hours of writing leave your fingers stiff, your wrist cramping into a claw. You flex them discreetly, massaging the base of your thumb. Every scribe knows this pain. It's the cost of a profession where muscle memory matters more than muscle strength. You could haul baskets of mud for the irrigation ditches and your back would ache for a day. But write for hours? Your hand might throb for a lifetime. The master calls out a passage from the Instructions of Ptahhotep, one of the classic texts drilled into every apprentice. Do not be arrogant because of your knowledge, but take counsel with the ignorant as with the wise. The apprentices repeat it, their voices stumbling over the rhythm. You mouth the words silently with them, half mocking yourself. Knowledge makes you powerful, yes, but a sore wrist is enough to humble anyone. There's an odd satisfaction in these drills, even for you now. They root you in a tradition that stretches back centuries. Generations of scribes have copied the same phrases, drawn the same signs, squinted at the same stubborn owl glyph. The repetition is numbing, but in that numbness lies comfort. You aren't just you, you're part of a long chain, a lineage of ink and patience. Still, the room isn't without humor. An older apprentice, perhaps emboldened by boredom, sketches a doodle in the margin of his ostrakhan, a little stick figure man with donkey ears chasing a goose. He grins at it for just a second too long before the master catches him. A sharp rap across his knuckles makes him yelp, dropping the shard. The class snickers, and you can't help but chuckle yourself, quickly stifled when the master shoots you a glare. Even as a grown scribe, you're not entirely safe from that stare. The smell of ink grows stronger as the room heats up. The jar on your bench thickens in the sun, the black paste turning sluggish. You stir it with your pen, annoyed at the sticky resistance. More water, just a drop, thins it again. A simple fix, but a reminder that every tiny element can make or break your work. Too much water and the ink bleeds. Too little and your lines dry to dust. Balance is everything. The master continues the drill, now shifting to numbers. 1, 10, 100, 1000. The apprentices chant, scratching strokes and spirals into their shards. Numbers are the lifeblood of Egypt as much as words. Grain tallies, tax rolls, rations, wages. Without them, the temples would crumble and the granaries would stand empty. You find yourself idly jotting a column of numerals on the edge of your scroll, muscle memory guiding the strokes. A single curl here, a lotus there. Clean, efficient, sharp. The hand cramp returns, sudden and sharp this time. You mutter, shake your hand, flex your fingers until they crack. The apprentice beside you glances up, curious, maybe hopeful, that even seasoned scribes aren't immune to mistakes. You give him a quick smile. Your hand will learn, or it will hate you forever. Either way, you'll write. The boy laughs nervously, not sure if you're joking. You lean back, stretching your arms until your shoulders pop. Around the room, the chant fades, replaced by the scratching of pens. The apprentices are deep in their own struggles now, some whispering prayers to Thoth for steadier hands. You remember doing the same, pleading silently that the god of wisdom and writing would guide your reed pen. You still whisper the prayer sometimes, though you suspect Thoth has more important things to do than babysit your shaky handwriting. The master paces the room, eyes sharp, staff tapping rhythmically against the floor. He stops behind one boy, nods approvingly, and moves on. Behind another, he pauses longer, his frown deepening. You know what comes next.
The staff descends, a sharp tap on the shoulder. Not cruel, just corrective. The boy straightens, biting his lip, and redoubles his effort. The rhythm of discipline is as much a part of the scribal house as ink and papyrus.
And yet, despite the sternness, there's a strange camaraderie here. You catch snippets of whispered jokes between apprentices, the quick grin exchanged when the master's back is turned. The shared pain of sore wrists and smudged ink binds them together. You were part of that once. In a way, you still are.
By mid-morning, the drills taper off. The apprentices slump, rubbing their hands, their shards littered with half-finished glyphs. The master dismisses them for a short break, and the room exhales collectively. You do too, rolling your shoulders, setting down your pen. The ache in your hand is sharp now, pulsing with each heartbeat, but you welcome it. Pain means progress. Pain means the work is real. You glance at your scroll, the neat lines stretching across it, black and red balanced like a conversation. The work is tedious, yes, but there's pride in seeing the page fill, in knowing each sign is a bridge between thought and permanence. Your stomach growls softly, reminding you that lunch is still a ways off. You smirk to yourself, imagining a loaf of barley bread that doesn't taste like sand. Then you chuckle. No, some dreams are too wild even for a scribe. When the master finally dismisses the apprentices for the midday break, the scribal house exhales into a softer hum. The boys scatter, clutching their shards and muttering about how their hands are ruined forever, while you stay behind to finish rolling up your scroll. Your wrist aches, your stomach complains, and you realize the day is already slipping away. But the next task calls. Not just copying lines or chanting wisdom, but recording the actual heartbeat of Egypt, the accounts. A steward arrives just as the apprentices shuffle out, his sandals clapping against the threshold. He carries a basket piled high with clay tokens, little shaped markers that represent portions of grain, oil, or beer. His tunic is smudged with dust, and the faint smell of the granaries clings to him, earthy, warm, and just a little sour. He drops the basket beside your bench, wipes his forehead, and grunts, "The tally for this week. Make it neat."
Of course it has to be neat. The temple priests will pore over these numbers, making sure every grain of barley finds its place. The pharaoh's officials want the same. And if something is off, well, no scribe wants to be blamed for missing grain that mysteriously disappears into someone's pockets. Historians still argue whether temple scribes were watchdogs against corruption or accomplices in it. But from your seat, you know the truth. You write the numbers as they come, and you pray nobody asks where the missing sacks went. You unroll a fresh section of papyrus, smoothing the surface. The steward begins calling out amounts while dropping tokens one by one onto the bench. 20 sacks barley, 15 jars beer, 2 geese. You mark each entry in crisp black ink, your reed pen gliding as quickly as your aching hand allows. Numbers have their own rhythm. Repeated strokes for ones, spirals for tens, lotus flowers for thousands. They stack like bricks in an invisible wall, neat and logical. There's an odd beauty in it. Grain tallies are not as poetic as hymns to the gods, but they matter just as much. Egypt does not live on hymns alone. The people eat bread and drink beer, and someone has to make sure the harvest feeds mouths instead of rats. You, with your cramped wrist and smudged ink, are part of that machinery. The steward drones on, sweat dripping down his nose. You try not to sigh too loudly when he pauses to scratch his beard, leaving you hanging mid-number. 45, goats. You lift an eyebrow. Goats? You glance at him, and he shrugs. One got loose in the temple courtyard, caused a mess. You chuckle under your breath, picturing priests in flowing linen chasing after a bleeding goat as if it were possessed by Seth himself. You jot the number down, still grinning. As the tally grows, the papyrus fills with neat columns. You dip your reed into red ink to mark the headings: barley delivered, beer jars received, animals counted. Red for emphasis, black for detail. It's the balance every account scroll follows, like music written in two tones. And you know, centuries from now, some archaeologist might unroll one of these and marvel at your tidy lists, wondering if the scribe behind them dreamed of something more. Joke's on them, you dream of better bread and a nap. A fellow scribe leans over from the next bench, smirking. Careful with that ink. If you smear a goose, the priests will think it's a duck. You snort, trying to stifle laughter. Humor thrives even in dusty ledgers. You mutter back, maybe I'll invent a new animal. Half goose, half goat. Then they can argue which god owns it. Speaking of gods, you pause at the next entry. The steward rattles off, 2 measures honey offered to Ray. Offerings are always recorded separately, elevated above the mundane. You dip your pen in red and carefully write the sun disk symbol. There's something almost reverent about the gesture, as though the ink itself is part of the offering. And maybe it is. Writing makes an offering real in the eyes of gods and men. By now, your hand feels heavy, as though the reed weighs as much as a chisel. You flex your fingers, rubbing the joints, but keep going. The steward isn't finished, and the scroll stretches onward. Dip, stroke, lift, repeat. The endless rhythm of recording what flows in and out of Egypt's heart. Finally, he drops the last token into the basket, mutters something about fetching water, and lumbers out. You sit back with a sigh, surveying the neat lines across your scroll. Each sign is precise, each number accounted for. The ink gleams faintly in the sunlight, not yet dry. You fan the papyrus gently, careful not to smear the columns. There's no glory in these lists, but there is pride. Without them, chaos would swallow Egypt. As you tidy your palette, another thought crosses your mind. How strange it is that so much of your life is bound to numbers. Priests sing hymns, soldiers swing swords, farmers sow fields. But you count, you write, you tally goats and geese, jars and sacks. It's not heroic, yet it's the quiet heroism that keeps the world steady. Without scribes, no temple offering would be honored, no tax collected, no rations distributed. Egypt would dissolve into forgetfulness. Your stomach growls again, reminding you that counting goats doesn't fill your belly. You roll up the scroll, tie it neatly, and hand it to the steward when he returns with a jug of water. He grunts thanks, already distracted, and shuffles away. You watch him go, the basket of clay tokens rattling at his side. Just another day, another tally, another record destined for a storeroom where it will sit in the dark until someone needs to know how many jars of beer arrived on the 5th day of the 3rd month of the season of harvest. It's absurd, in a way, and yet deeply serious. Your ink captures time itself, holding it still for anyone who dares unroll it in the future. You smirk faintly, whispering, "May they at least appreciate the handwriting." You set your reed down at last, stretch your arms, and feel the joints in your back crackle like dry papyrus. The apprentices will return soon, full of complaints about their lunch. You'll return to your scrolls, your ink, your numbers. For now, though, you savor the tiny pause, the silence after the steward's endless voice. The room smells of ink and sweat, of clay dust and papyrus glue. It's not glamorous, but it's home. And as your fingers throb from the tally, you can't help but smile. Because here, in the quiet counting of geese and jars, you find a kind of peace, mundane, repetitive, necessary. And besides, you tell yourself, one day a story might outshine a ledger. But today, the goats win. The air outside the scribal house feels heavier now, the sun climbing higher and the streets shimmering in a haze of heat. You step into the brightness, blinking as your eyes adjust. Lunch is not a grand affair, not for a scribe like you. There are no golden platters, no feasts with musicians plucking harps. Just the ordinary meal that sustains the backbone of Egypt. Bread, beer, maybe a little onion if fortune smiles on you. You wander toward the courtyard where other scribes gather during the midday break. The ground is hard-packed earth, shaded only in patches where palm fronds throw their thin shadows. A few boys kick at the dust, others stretch out flat like lizards basking. The smell of food drifts faintly from nearby homes, mingling with the sharper scent of donkey dung drying in the sun. Not exactly mouth-watering, but you're used to it. From your satchel, you pull a round of coarse barley bread wrapped in a bit of linen. The crust is hard, gritty, with stray bits of husk that somehow escaped the grinding stone. You bite into it anyway, chewing slowly, your jaw doing most of the work. The bread is filling, but never soft, more like edible stone than anything divine. You make a joke to yourself that it could probably double as a writing tablet if you pressed hard enough. Still, hunger has a way of making even sand-textured bread taste like a blessing. Next comes the beer. Not the frothy, golden liquid of modern fantasies, but a thick, porridge-like drink brewed from barley. It's sour, heavy, and just sweet enough to keep it from tasting like spoiled grain. You sip from a clay cup, letting it wash down the stubborn crumbs of bread stuck in your throat. Everyone drinks it, from peasants to priests, because water alone isn't always safe. Beer is food as much as drink, a liquid meal that fills your stomach and dulls your thirst at once. Around you, the chatter of fellow scribes hums like bees. One complains about the steward's endless lists, another about the blisters forming on his hand. Someone jokes that their reed pens must be secretly cursed by a rival god, probably Seth, always meddling. You laugh along, tearing off another piece of bread. Humor is as necessary as food. Without it, the work would swallow you whole. You glance at the boy sitting nearest you, one of the younger apprentices. He unwraps his lunch, a single onion and a scrap of dried fish. He eats with the same determination he writes, biting into the onion raw, eyes watering but face stoic. You wince just watching. You remember when that was your meal, onions sharp enough to burn your nose, fish salty enough to make your tongue ache. But food is food, and no scribe can write on an empty belly. There are moments of quiet, too. You lean back against the wall, chewing slowly, watching the sky above the courtyard. The blue is harsh, almost white at its edges, the sun hammering down like Ra himself scolding the earth. Insects buzz lazily around, and somewhere in the distance a donkey brays with the volume of 100 trumpets. You mutter, "That one could be trained as a herald," and the scribes around you chuckle. The meal is not just eating, it's observing. You take note of how food ties the entire kingdom together. The farmer grows the barley. The brewer ferments it into beer. The baker shapes it into bread. And you, the scribe, record the flow of it all, making sure nobody claims too much or too little. Every crumb on your tongue is also an entry in a ledger somewhere. Even in chewing, you're part of Egypt's endless system of balance. After finishing most of your bread, you pull a small jar of honey from your satchel. It's rare, too precious to waste, but today you allow yourself a spoonful spread across the last bite. The sweetness is startling, a reminder that not every flavor has to be dull or bitter. You close your eyes for a moment, savoring it. This is luxury, brief, golden, gone too quickly. You lick the sticky trace from your fingers, chuckling. If only honey could fill scrolls as well as bellies, you murmur. Nearby, an older scribe tells a story about crocodile dung sunscreen. Yes, that bizarre trick people swear by. He swears his aunt actually used it on hot days at the riverbank. The group erupts in groans and laughter. You shake your head, grateful for shade and linen instead. Historians still argue whether Egyptians truly relied on such concoctions or if it was more of a folk tale. But either way, you're glad your skin is only covered in ink stains. The meal winds down slowly. Clay cups are drained, crumbs brushed off tunics, laughter fading into yawns. You stretch your legs, feeling the stiffness from sitting hunched at the bench all morning. Your body feels like the papyrus you work with, flexible, but always threatening to crack if pressed the wrong way. The apprentices gather their things first, eager to show they're ready before the master calls. You smile at their nervous energy, remembering your own. Then you glance at your nearly empty satchel. Bread gone, beer drained, just a sticky trace of honey left at the bottom of the jar. Enough to keep you going until nightfall. Barely. As you rise, brushing the dust from your knees, you think about how unglamorous this life looks from the outside. No feasts, no treasures, no flowing banquets, just coarse bread and gritty beer, day after day. And yet, there's something comforting about it. Predictable, grounding. You eat the same food as millions of others up and down the Nile, from laborers hauling blocks to priests chanting prayers. In this, at least, everyone is equal. Your stomach is full enough, your throat wet enough, your body heavy with that familiar midday drowsiness. For a brief moment, you wish you could lie back in the shade, close your eyes, and drift into sleep. But you know what waits. The scrolls don't write themselves. The ink dries if left too long. The master's staff will tap impatiently if you're late. So you stand, shoulders rolling, arms stretching wide like the wings of a heron. The courtyard shimmers around you, dust motes dancing in the light. You let out a sigh that feels as long as the Nile itself. Lunch is done. The day marches on. You tuck your empty satchel beneath your arm and turn back toward the scribal house. Time to trade breadcrumbs for ink stains, beer froth for hieroglyphs. Another scroll, another tally, another stretch of cramped fingers. The cycle continues, as steady as the river. And as you step back through the doorway into the dim, ink-scented air, you can't help but smile. Bread may fuel your body, beer may quench your thirst, but it is the ink that sustains your soul. Back inside the scribal house, the afternoon light slants across the benches, turning the papyrus fibers into glowing threads under your hand. Lunch has taken the edge off your hunger, but the heaviness in your body remains. The scribal life is not just about writing, it's also about teaching. And now that the scrolls are rolled up for the moment, it's time to guide the apprentices through their next ordeal. The master clears his throat, that familiar signal that makes every boy straighten up as though pulled by invisible strings. He gestures to you. "Show them how it's done," he says, voice as dry as the desert wind. You sigh inwardly, but you pick up a reed pen, dip it lightly in the ink, and unroll a scrap of papyrus. All eyes are on you. The reed leaf for I, the folded cloth for S, the seated man for man. Your strokes are fluid, practiced, yet you feel the prickling awareness of being watched. One slip of the pen and you'll hear snickers from the back row. But you don't slip. Your hand may ache, your wrist may complain, but your lines flow with confidence. "Notice," you say softly, "how the pen rests lightly. If you press too hard, the papyrus tears. If too soft, the ink fades. Balance is everything." You look up to see blank stares, a few nods, and one boy chewing his lip like he'd rather be anywhere else. You smile faintly. You'll ruin a dozen shards before you get it right. Maybe 100. That's fine. Ink forgives patience. The apprentices bend over their ostraka, scratching away. The sound is like a chorus of crickets, uneven, squeaky, sometimes interrupted by a groan when a glyph collapses into a smudge. You wander among them, glancing over shoulders. One boy's owl looks like a fish gasping for air. Another's sun disk resembles a smashed bread roll. You resist the urge to laugh out loud. Instead, you gently tap their shoulders, offering quiet correction. Curve it here. Keep the line straight there. The master paces at the back, staff tapping rhythmically. You remember that sound in your bones, the dread it once inspired. But today, you wield the softer power, the patience of someone who knows the journey from blotches to beauty. You murmur encouragement, slip in a quiet joke or two. If that owl had legs, it might run away from your shard, you tease one boy. He laughs nervously, erases the blot with a damp cloth, and tries again. The teaching is not just about glyphs. It's about discipline, endurance, and humility. You know that. Writing may look effortless when the scrolls are neat and orderly, but behind every perfect line lies years of sore wrists and sleepless nights. You tell the apprentices as much, though you soften the edges. Your hand will betray you, you say. Your ink will blot. Your reed will split. The trick is to keep writing anyway. One of the older apprentices raises his hand timidly. Master, why do we need to learn all of this if most people can't read it? His voice carries both curiosity and defiance. A ripple of whispers follows. He has dared to ask what many secretly wonder. You pause, setting your reed down. The room grows still. The master's pacing stops. You meet the boy's eyes. Because words are power, you say slowly. The farmer tills the soil. The soldier guards the borders. The priest chants the prayers. But the scribe, you spread your ink-stained fingers. The scribe remembers. Without us, what happens is forgotten the next day. With us, it lives forever. A silence follows, heavy but thoughtful. The boy nods, still chewing on the answer. The master grunts approval from the back, then resumes his pacing. You smile inwardly. Maybe you've planted a seed of pride in him, or at least bought yourself a few days without that question being asked again. The drills resume, the boys hunched like tiny turtles over their shards. You circulate again, offering a word here, a gesture there. Your own hand throbs less now, as though the act of teaching has transferred some of the ache to them. You almost pity them, but not quite. This is the price of joining your brotherhood of ink. A quirky thought drifts through your mind as you watch the boys. How odd it is that so many years of their lives will be devoted to mastering signs that take an instant to draw, but a lifetime to perfect. Historians still argue whether the complexity of hieroglyphs was a tool to keep scribes indispensable or simply an art form too beloved to abandon. Either way, you know one truth: the longer it takes to learn, the more sacred it feels. Eventually, the apprentices begin to flag. Their wrists ache, their eyes glaze, their owls look increasingly drunk. You clap your hands softly, signaling a pause. Enough for today, you murmur. The relief is immediate. Shoulders slump, sighs escape, shards are set down with the reverence of soldiers laying aside their weapons. You hide your smile. The boys drift toward the courtyard, chattering, comparing their lopsided glyphs as though they were prized treasures. You linger a moment, rolling up the scrap of papyrus you used for demonstration. The master nods at you, a rare acknowledgement. They learn from you, he says simply. Then he turns away, already lost in his own scroll. You sit back at your bench, stretching your fingers, letting the quiet settle. Teaching drains you in a different way than writing, but it also leaves you strangely lighter. The cycle continues. Apprentice becomes scribe, scribe becomes teacher, and somewhere down the line, another hand will carry the reed pen forward. The afternoon light dims slightly as a cloud drifts across the sun. You breathe in the stillness of the room, the faint rustle of papyrus, the lingering smell of ink. You know the apprentices will be back tomorrow, ready to smudge more owls, to curse their cramped fingers, to question why this work matters. And you will answer them again, patiently, sarcastically, sleepily. Because that's the life of a scribe, not just writing, but teaching others to carry the ink into the future. And besides, you think with a smirk, the world will never run out of badly drawn owls. The afternoon stretches on, a slow river of sunlight spilling through the windows, and you return to your own work. Teaching is done, but the scribal day is far from over. Scrolls still wait, ink still dries slowly, and the rhythmic scratch of reed against papyrus calls you back to the bench. You settle into your place, rubbing your hands together to warm them, a small ritual that eases your joints into the familiar task. You unroll a new scroll, one intended for the temple records, documenting offerings and duties assigned for the month. Its surface is uneven, a slight ripple where the papyrus wasn't pressed perfectly. You smooth it carefully, knowing that even the tiniest crease can betray your work, causing ink to pool or lines to wobble. Precision is a scribe's quiet obsession, and your eyes scan the fibers as though each one might rebel under your pen. You dip your reed lightly in the black ink, testing its flow. The tip glides over the papyrus like a boat on calm water, leaving a trail of neat, deliberate signs. A small satisfaction rises in you, the simple joy of making order from blankness. Each hieroglyph forms a bridge between thought and eternity, a tangible link to a world that stretches beyond the walls of the scribal house. Around you, the room hums with quiet energy. Other scribes bend over their own scrolls, some reciting lines under their breath, others moving in near silent concentration. The faint rustle of papyrus and the occasional scratch of a broken reed pen form a lullaby of productivity. You close your eyes for a moment, just a blink, letting the rhythm of work wash over you. Your hand aches, as it always does by mid-afternoon. The muscles between thumb and wrist pulse with dull insistence, a reminder that writing is endurance as much as skill. You flex your fingers and roll your wrist, feeling the joint pop faintly. Pain is a constant companion, but a manageable one. It marks the effort you've invested, the hours spent in the service of ink and papyrus. You glance at the corner of the scroll, where a column of red ink awaits. These are headings, the sacred or important parts of the text that demand emphasis. You dip your pen into the red, careful not to let the heavier pigment drip. The line stretches smoothly across the fibers. Red, black, red, black. It's a quiet conversation, a visual rhythm that guides the eye and the mind. Historians still argue whether these choices of color carry deeper meaning beyond emphasis, but to you, they are as natural as breathing. A sudden squeak from the doorway draws your attention. An apprentice peeks in, holding a small bundle of ostraka. His eyes are wide, a mixture of curiosity and awe, as though he's stepping into a sacred space. You gesture for him to come closer, noting the slight wobble in his stance, the careful way he carries the shards. He places them on a bench beside you, eyes flicking up to gauge your reaction. "Not bad," you murmur, inspecting his work. "A few owls could be straighter, but the reed is doing its best." He nods quickly, relief washing over his face. You smile faintly. Encouragement is a tool as important as ink, though subtler. One well-timed word can guide a hand more effectively than repeated corrections. Back to your scroll, you continue writing, letting the lines build steadily. Accounts, offerings, temple inventories, the work may seem mundane, but every stroke preserves order. Without scribes, chaos would seep in like water through a cracked dam.
You note the barley sent to the granaries, jars of beer, dates offered to the gods, and small gifts from farmers seeking favor. Each entry is precise, deliberate, a record not just of goods, but of civilization itself. The sun shifts again, casting longer shadows across the benches. You pause briefly, rubbing your neck, feeling the slow burn of fatigue creeping in. The apprentices have retreated to the courtyard or dozing against walls, but your scroll stretches on. You dip the pen again, letting it glide across the fibers, feeling the familiar resistance, the slight give that makes the work tactile and satisfying. A faint laugh drifts from the doorway. One of the older scribes is telling a story about a cat that allegedly stole offerings meant for the gods and nearly caused a temple scandal. You chuckle softly, shaking your head. Even in this room of meticulous order, absurdity creeps in, reminding you that life is never as rigid as the lines you draw. You scribble a small note in the margin, a personal joke that only you will ever see, a tiny rebellion against perfection. Hours pass in the blur of ink and fiber. Your hand aches, your back stiffens, your stomach grumbles faintly, but you continue. There's a rhythm here, a meditation. Each glyph a step, each line a breath. Writing becomes a bridge between time and eternity, between thought and permanence. The scribal house exists in this balance, a place where order reigns, and the chaos of the outside world is calmed by the gentle scrape of reed against papyrus. By late afternoon, the light has softened, and a warm breeze drifts through the open doorway. You pause to lean back, stretching arms and shoulders, feeling the tension ebb slightly. Outside, the Nile glimmers faintly in the distance, a reminder of the larger world beyond your benches and scrolls. Life flows there, fishermen hauling nets, farmers tending fields, children chasing geese. But inside, you preserve it, one careful stroke at a time. A subtle satisfaction settles in your chest. The day has been productive. The scrolls before you are neat, precise, and ready to be stored or delivered. The apprentices have learned something, even if just a little, about patience and precision. You have taught, recorded, and endured another segment of the endless cycle. You stretch one last time, feeling the fatigue, but also the quiet pride. The scribal life is not glamorous, not celebrated in song or dance, but it is vital. Without scribes, the world would lose its memory, its order, its continuity. And here you sit, a quiet guardian of Egypt's legacy. Hands ink-stained, wrists aching, mind alert yet drifting, always drifting. Outside, the shadows lengthen further. Soon, the temple bells will call the day to a close, and the streets will echo with evening life. But for now, you linger a moment longer, savoring the calm of your work, the tactile joy of pen on papyrus, the soft hum of the room around you. The afternoon drifts into evening, and the scribal house feels quieter now. The sun has slipped low, casting long golden bars across benches and scrolls, and the warm light pools like honey on the floor. Your wrist aches less than it did earlier, replaced by a pleasant fatigue that comes from the rhythm of work. There is a meditative quality to writing at this hour, as though the world outside, its heat, dust, and clamor, has been set aside, leaving only ink, papyrus, and the faint whisper of your own breath. You pick up a new scroll, one assigned for temple correspondence. Letters to distant officials, updates on supplies, and notifications of rituals performed must be recorded carefully. These are delicate documents. A single smudge or misaligned line could change meaning, potentially causing confusion or offense. You dip your reed into the black ink, testing the flow, then set it to the papyrus with deliberate precision. Each stroke carries intention, long or short, vertical or curved, and the rhythm is both familiar and comforting.
The room hums with quiet energy. Other scribes work in their own corners, some reciting their text softly under their breath, others so absorbed that they barely notice the slanting evening light. Occasionally, the scratching of a reed pen against papyrus punctuates the air like a tiny drumbeat. You close your eyes briefly, letting the meditative cadence carry you, imagining the river Nile flowing endlessly, each ripple a whisper of time passing. Your thoughts wander to the broader purpose of your work. Each scroll, no matter how mundane it seems, is a link in Egypt's vast administrative chain. Grain shipments, labor allocations, temple offerings, they all must be recorded meticulously. Without these records, chaos would seep into the carefully structured society. You trace a column of numbers with your finger, imagining the granaries stacked with barley, the storehouses filled with beer jars, the priests performing rituals without missing a step. Historians still argue whether scribes were mere record keepers or active participants in power dynamics, but you know your role. You preserve order with patience and ink. A young apprentice peeks in from the doorway, eyes wide and hesitant. You beckon him over. He carries a bundle of ostraca, the shards worn smooth from repeated practice. "Place them here," you say softly. His hands tremble slightly as he sets them down. You glance at the shards, noting the uneven strokes and occasional smudges, and your lips curl into a faint smile. Everyone begins somewhere. Even your flawless lines were once blotchy, your owls once indistinct. You guide him gently, demonstrating the curvature of a symbol, the spacing of signs, and the proper tilt of the reed pen. "Watch how I hold it," you murmur, dipping the pen again. The apprentice mimics your movements, his strokes uneven but growing steadier with each attempt. You chuckle softly, whispering, "Don't worry if the owl looks like a fat bird, just keep going." Humor eases tension, and even in this disciplined space, a laugh is a small rebellion against perfection. While the boy scribbles, you glance at your scroll. Temple correspondence is tedious, yet there is a subtle satisfaction in the methodical recording of duties and deliveries. Each line, each stroke preserves continuity. Even errors are instructive. They remind future readers that humans wrote these documents, not machines. You pause to correct a minor blot, smoothing the fibers carefully with your fingers. It's a gentle touch, one that has been honed over years of repetitive labor. A faint smell of ink and papyrus fills the room, mingled with the warmth of the setting sun. You inhale deeply, savoring it. It is the scent of your craft, your world. Outside, the chatter of children and the distant bray of donkeys rise from the streets, but inside, there is only focus and quiet purpose. The apprentice pauses to rest, his eyes blinking, hands stiffening. You nod, allowing him a brief respite before the next round of instruction. Your gaze drifts to another scribe across the room, one who works on account scrolls with tireless precision. The lines are neat, almost hypnotically so, and you marvel at the patience required to maintain such consistency. A fleeting thought crosses your mind. The meticulous nature of scribal work mirrors life itself. Small errors can propagate, small details carry weight, and yet there is a beauty in the order that emerges. Time slips by unnoticed. The apprentice has returned to his work, the reed pen scratching lightly against the ostraca. You continue your own writing, dipping and gliding, black ink and red headings forming a visual rhythm. Each column, each line is a testament to endurance, skill, and the unglamorous heroism of daily labor. A subtle thought drifts in, half amusing, half curious. Someday, perhaps, someone will unroll these very scrolls, squinting at your handwriting, marveling at your neat lines, and wondering about the scribe behind the ink. Will they imagine a grand palace? Will they picture divine inspiration? You smirk quietly. No, they'll probably see only ink and papyrus, and that's enough. You're content leaving the mundane behind for eternity. The apprentice glances up at you, eyes filled with both exhaustion and pride. He has learned something today, not just the form of the symbols, but the patience and care required to sustain them. You offer him a faint nod, and he smiles shyly. This is why you teach, why you endure hours of repetitive work, why you cringe and flex your fingers with each weary stroke. Outside, the sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor like fingers of gold. The room begins to cool slightly as the heat of the day wanes. You lean back for a moment, rubbing your wrists and shoulders, feeling the satisfying ache of effort well spent. Ink-stained fingers, tired muscles, and the gentle hum of your environment form a quiet symphony of productivity and purpose. Eventually, you roll up the scroll, smooth it carefully, and tie it with a strip of linen cord. The apprentice copies your motion, watching intently, learning not only how to handle the papyrus, but how to respect it. You place both scrolls carefully aside, ready for storage, delivery, or review by the master. Evening draws near. The room smells faintly of ink, warm papyrus, and the lingering dust of the day. Outside, the city shifts. Street vendors pack up, donkeys are herded to pens, children scamper home. But inside, there is only calm, quiet order. You take a deep breath, enjoying this moment of stillness before the final tasks of the day. And as you sit back, letting your fingers relax from their delicate labor, a sense of completion settles over you. Another day, another scroll, another apprentice guided. Ink may stain, wrists may ache, but the work endures. Your hands have built bridges between thought and eternity, and for that, you allow yourself a small, satisfied smile. The room is bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon, and the day begins to wind down in its own quiet rhythm. You roll up another scroll, your wrist stiff from hours of precise strokes, but there is a calm satisfaction in seeing neat columns and tidy hieroglyphs stretching across the papyrus. Teaching, recording, and guiding the apprentices have left their mark on both your hands and mind, but the sense of purpose lingers, stronger than fatigue. Outside the open doorway, you catch a glimpse of the Nile, its waters reflecting the fading sunlight like molten gold. Boats drift lazily along the current, their sails catching the breeze. Fishermen shout across the river, and distant children's laughter carries faintly over the water. For a moment, you imagine the ease of being out there, away from ink and papyrus, feeling the sun on your shoulders rather than the concentrated strain of calligraphy. But then you glance down at the scroll before you, and remember, this work is what keeps Egypt flowing, even if the glory is hidden behind neat black lines. You unroll a new section of temple accounts, one detailing minor offerings and small donations made by the local villagers. Each grain of incense, each loaf of bread, each jar of honey must be recorded accurately. These details may seem insignificant, but they are the threads holding the larger tapestry of the kingdom together. A miscount could mean a slight shortage, a missed ritual, or even confusion among the temple staff. Historians still argue whether such minutiae were vital to Egypt's stability or merely ceremonial, but to you, every entry is an act of quiet guardianship. Your reed pen glides across the papyrus, black ink flowing into clean, deliberate strokes. Red ink accents the headings, offerings for Hathor, daily donations, miscellaneous contributions. There is a strange rhythm to the process, like counting waves, each symbol echoing the one before it. You pause occasionally, tapping your wrist and flexing fingers, noticing how small the ache has become as your muscles adjust to the steady pace. It's repetitive work, yes, but in repetition lies meditation. One of the apprentices approaches, clutching a shard of pottery in both hands. His eyes are wide, a mixture of pride and trepidation, as though he is presenting a gift to a king rather than a simple piece of writing practice. "Master, I think I did it right," he murmurs. You glance at the lines, the symbols uneven but recognizable, each stroke filled with effort. "Not bad," you reply softly, pointing out a minor correction. "See this curve here? Bend it just slightly more, and your owl will look alive instead of squashed." His eyes light up, and he adjusts the stroke, his hand trembling slightly but growing steadier. Small victories like this are the currency of Describal House, moments of progress that are hard-won and quietly celebrated. You return to your own scroll, your mind wandering as your reed pen moves. Odd little thoughts drift in. The taste of yesterday's barley bread, the distant croak of frogs near the river, the memory of a donkey escaping through the courtyard last week. Humor and observation often accompany your work, subtle reminders that life is never entirely contained within neat lines of ink. One day, perhaps, you will even record these small absurdities in your own private margins. The apprentices scurry back to their benches, whispering softly as they try to perfect their strokes. You circulate between them, offering gentle guidance and quiet jokes, like suggesting the sun disk could be a golden pancake if they squint hard enough. Laughter bubbles briefly, a reminder that even in the most disciplined environments, humanity persists. Hours stretch, and the late sunlight begins to soften. The shadows lengthen across the floor, pooling around benches and scrolls like ink spilled across papyrus. You feel the day's weariness creeping back, shoulders stiff, wrists sore, but the satisfaction of completed work tempers the fatigue. Each scroll finished is a small triumph, each apprentice guided a subtle legacy. A distant sound draws your attention, a faint commotion from the street. You glance briefly, seeing villagers moving homeward, carts laden with produce, and children trailing behind in a blur of movement. Life outside the scribal house continues, chaotic and unmeasured, yet it relies on the quiet, careful work happening within these walls. Every grain recorded, every offering counted, every line of hieroglyphs maintained the rhythm of their world. Your thoughts wander to the masters of your own apprenticeship, recalling the stern hands, the sharp taps of the staff, the relentless drills. You recognize their intent now: patience, endurance, precision. And now, as a seasoned scribe, you pass those lessons forward, not with fear, but with gentle guidance. You shape the future of Egypt quietly, one hand, one symbol, one apprentice at a time. Evening settles more fully, and the room cools. The smell of ink lingers, mingling with faint dust from the papyrus and the faint sweetness of honey from your earlier lunch. You flex your fingers once more, watching as the apprentices quietly pack away their tools, tired but accomplished. You nod to them, a silent acknowledgement of their progress and your shared toil. Your gaze drifts to the final column of the scroll before you. The entries are complete, neat, precise, and balanced. You tap your reed against the edge of the bench, a small ritual of satisfaction. Another day nearly done, another record preserved. The temple will have its documentation, the villagers' offerings will be noted, and history, in its unglamorous way, marches forward. Taking a deep breath, allowing the quiet hum of the scribal house to fill your senses. There is comfort here, in the repetition, in the precision, in the slow accumulation of work that, when done faithfully, sustains life and memory. The apprentices have learned, the scrolls are complete, and for a fleeting moment, the world outside can continue without your immediate intervention. And as the sun slips below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow that fades into soft twilight, you feel the familiar blend of fatigue and satisfaction. Ink-stained fingers, aching wrists, tired eyes, all reminders that the work endures, that you endure, and that the rhythm of a scribe's day is as constant and sustaining as the Nile itself. The twilight deepens, and the scribal house begins to settle into a quieter rhythm. The apprentices, tired from hours of practice and lessons, sit on benches or lean against walls, their shards stacked beside them. You watch them for a moment, noting the small victories, the smoother lines, the more confident curves, the faint but growing pride in their posture. Their progress is slow, painstaking, and yet profoundly satisfying. You unroll a fresh scroll, this one intended for the record of temple offerings over the coming festival season. Even as the room cools and the last traces of daylight filter through the windows, the work remains demanding. The scroll's fibers are uneven, the edges slightly warped, and the reed pen must glide carefully to avoid smudging the ink. Each line, each glyph must be deliberate, a testament to order and care. You dip the pen into black ink and begin, watching the strokes flow smoothly, each curve a practiced motion. There is a rhythm here, a subtle music of the hand against papyrus. The apprentices glance up occasionally, inspired to mimic your steady movements, though their own strokes still wobble. You offer gentle corrections and quiet encouragement, noting how even minor guidance transforms hesitation into progress. Offerings of incense, honey, barley, and small crafts. These are the sacred portions, the symbols of devotion to gods like Hathor and Osiris. You draw each red line carefully, the contrast striking against the black text. Historians still argue whether these colored accents carried a ritual significance beyond simple organization, but to you, they create clarity, elegance, and a sense of order in a world that often feels chaotic. All of this work, so meticulous and repetitive, exists to maintain balance. Balance between the mundane and the divine, between the laborers in the fields and the priests in the temple. Balance between human memory and the impermanence of life. Your reed pen, your ink-stained fingers, your weary eyes, all of it contributes to this equilibrium. Without such order, even Egypt itself might falter. An apprentice raises his hand timidly, holding up a shard. "Master, I think I made a mistake," he whispers. You glance at the glyphs, noticing a crooked stroke in the owl symbol. You smile softly. "A mistake," you murmur, "or an opportunity to try again? The owl is resilient. It survives a wobble or two." He laughs nervously and redraws the stroke with careful attention. Moments like these are small victories for both teacher and pupil. The room is quiet now, the soft scratch of reed pens punctuating the stillness. Outside, the city hums with evening activity. Donkeys returning to pens, children calling to each other, merchants closing their stalls. But inside, time flows differently. Here, it is measured in strokes, in columns, in careful alignment of symbols. The world outside continues its chaos, yet within these walls, order prevails. Your hand aches again, a dull, persistent throb that comes with hours of meticulous writing. You flex your fingers and rotate your wrist, feeling the stiffness ease slightly. Fatigue is inevitable, yet there is a certain pleasure in the ache. It is proof of work done, progress made, skill honed. You glance at the apprentices, seeing their own tired hands, and realize that each of them will know this same sensation in time, the satisfaction of effort etched in muscle memory. The scroll stretches across the bench, filled with neat columns of black and red, a record of devotion, labor, and continuity. Each symbol carries meaning, each line a testament to human diligence. You pause, gazing at the work. In moments like this, the room feels timeless, as though centuries of scribes have left echoes in the very air. The faint smell of ink and papyrus, the subtle warmth of the room, the quiet concentration, It is a sanctuary built from routine and precision. A mischievous thought flits through your mind. The apprentices will probably never imagine how strange future readers might perceive these scrolls. Will they wonder about the humans behind the ink? Will they marvel at the mundane beauty of barley counts and honey offerings? You smirk softly, imagining an archaeologist centuries from now puzzling over a crooked owl or a slightly smudged sun disk. Yes, they will marvel, but perhaps for entirely the wrong reasons. Your focus returns to the scroll. Each line is deliberate, each glyph precise, yet your mind drifts in small, whimsical directions, recalling the distant laughter of a donkey, the taste of coarse bread, or the absurd notion that one could write an entire poem using only mistakes. Humor, even in the midst of painstaking work, keeps the hand steady and the mind alert. You quietly imagine a future scribe copying your own errors centuries from now, shaking his head and muttering about the amusing inefficiency of your owls. As the shadows lengthen further, the apprentice's attention wanes. They lean against benches, rub their hands, and stretch tired shoulders. You give them a final round of gentle instruction, offering advice that is both practical and philosophical. Precision is important, but patience matters more. The hand may tire, but the mind endures. The ink may smear, but the work remains. They nod, absorbing the words in their own way, their eyes reflecting the quiet pride of accomplishment. The sun dips low behind the western horizon, the last light filtering through the windows in amber ribbons. You pause, stretching your back, letting the day's fatigue settle comfortably into your bones. The scroll is complete, neatly rolled and ready for storage or inspection. The apprentices are gathering their things, whispering softly among themselves, their chatter muted but filled with the satisfaction of work done and lessons learned. You take a moment to lean back in your bench, inhaling the faint scent of ink, papyrus, and dust. It is a familiar, grounding aroma, one that marks the rhythm of a life spent in quiet service to memory and order. Outside, the sounds of the city soften as dusk deepens. Footsteps on packed earth, the distant bray of a donkey, the call of a night bird beginning its vigil. Within, the scribal house remains a calm haven, the product of diligence and centuries of tradition. As your fingers rest on the scroll, you feel the subtle satisfaction of accomplishment. Another day has passed, another set of records, another apprentice guided, another small piece of Egypt preserved through ink and patient hands. The room is quiet, the apprentice is resting, the last traces of sunlight fading, and you, weary but content, know that tomorrow will bring the same rhythm, the same challenges, and the same quiet triumphs. Twilight has fully descended, and the scribal house takes on a serene hush. The day's labor lingers in the air, a mixture of warm papyrus, faint dust, and ink that has dried to a matte permanence. Your hands ache slightly, a gentle reminder of the hours spent forming each stroke, guiding each apprentice, and ensuring that every record, no matter how small, is accurate. Yet the fatigue is not unpleasant. It carries with it the quiet satisfaction of work completed, of order preserved. You roll out a fresh scroll, one reserved for miscellaneous records, minor temple repairs, notes about offerings that arrived late, and brief comments from the overseer. It is mundane, almost trivial, but it belongs to the chain of responsibility that keeps the larger system intact. Even the smallest entry matters. You dip your reed into black ink, testing the flow, and the familiar gliding motion fills you with a sense of purpose. The apprentices are now mostly silent, settling on benches or leaning against walls, some softly humming as they finish minor corrections on their own shards. A few glance toward you with quiet curiosity, their eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and fascination. You nod to them, a small acknowledgement of their day's work,
before focusing on the scroll before you.
Each glyph you write feels deliberate, measured, and meditative. There is a subtle rhythm to the act, black strokes for standard entries, red ink for headings and important notes, columns carefully aligned. Time seems to dilate here. Minutes stretch, elongated by concentration, and hours pass almost unnoticed. Historians still argue whether scribes experienced their work as an art or merely a duty, but for you, it is both, a disciplined ritual imbued with beauty.
The night air begins to creep in through the open doorway, carrying with it the faint smell of river mud and evening blossoms. Somewhere outside, a donkey brays in protest, and a child's distant laughter echoes. You smile quietly, recognizing that your work preserves a world that is alive and chaotic, even if the room itself seems suspended in stillness. A particularly tricky section of the scroll requires precise repetition of a long string of offerings, jars of beer, loaves of bread, measures of honey. Your wrist twinges slightly as you trace the lines, but your hand has learned to endure. You work slowly, deliberately, allowing each stroke to rest before moving to the next. Mistakes are rare at this hour, but you correct them gently when they appear, blotting the excess ink with practiced ease. An apprentice leans forward cautiously, whispering, "Master, do you ever get tired of counting?" You glance at him, amused. "Counting?" you murmur softly. "My boy, it's not just counting. It's remembering. It's making sure the world doesn't forget itself." He nods, eyes wide, as if understanding only half, but it is enough. Some lessons are absorbed slowly, over time, like the subtle hum of the Nile's current beneath the riverbank. The room is filled with the soft scratch of reeds against papyrus, punctuated occasionally by a gentle cough or the rustle of linen. You let your mind drift while your hand continues its work, thinking of the farmers who grew the barley, the brewers who fermented it into beer, and the priests who will receive it in offerings. Each record is a bridge, linking human effort, divine devotion, and the ever-turning wheel of life. Humor sneaks in despite your concentration. You catch a glimpse of an owl symbol on the apprentice's shard, slightly squashed, and suppress a quiet laugh. You mutter under your breath, "Perhaps the gods have a sense of irony," before moving on. Humor, you found, is essential. It lightens the weight of hours spent on meticulous repetition. A smile, even at a tiny imperfection, preserves sanity. The light outside dims further, replaced by a soft blue twilight that seeps into the room. The shadows of benches and scrolls stretch across the floor, and the scribal house seems almost suspended in time. You pause to stretch your back, rolling shoulders and neck. The ache of the day is fading into a comfortable weariness, the kind that reminds you you have worked well and fully. You glance once more at the scroll. Columns are neat, glyphs precise, and headings clearly distinguished. The records, though ordinary, hold within them the heartbeat of daily life. Offerings, minor repairs, notes on the flow of goods, and small acts of devotion. These details are mundane, yes, but without them, the temple and community could not function. Your work, humble and painstaking, forms the foundation of order. Even the apprentices notice. One boy whispers, "Master, it looks so perfect." You smile faintly. "Perfection," you reply softly, "is never truly possible. But care, attention, and patience, these endure." They nod, understanding in their own small way. In time, perhaps, they too will learn to love the rhythm of ink and papyrus, to appreciate the subtle beauty of a well-aligned column or a carefully curved glyph. The final stretch of the scroll is approached with quiet deliberation. You slow your movement slightly, aware that the end is near. The red headings gleam faintly in the dim light, and black lines stretch across the papyrus in perfect balance. You allow your eyes to wander briefly, noticing the slight variations in texture, the tiny imperfections that give the work character. Even in its precision, the scroll is alive. As night falls fully outside, a soft breeze drifts through the doorway, carrying the faint smell of river mud, evening flowers, and the distant cooking fires of the city. The room is hushed, still, and almost reverent. You pause, letting the moment sink in, appreciating the quiet culmination of a day spent in careful labor. Finally, the last glyph is set in place, the scroll complete. You sit back, rolling it gently and tying it with a linen strip. The apprentices have quieted, observing your movements with fascination and awe. You glance around the room, the ink-scented air, the faint golden shadows, and feel a deep satisfaction. The unglamorous, quiet, enduring triumphs of a day's work. Night has fully fallen, and the scribal house is enveloped in a calm, velvety darkness, softened only by the faint glow of oil lamps. The apprentices have settled quietly, some dozing on benches, others leaning against walls, exhausted from the day's lessons and scribal labor. You sit at your bench, the final scrolls neatly rolled and tied, the ink on your fingers dry but still faintly fragrant. There is a rhythm to this quiet, the gentle flicker of lamps, the distant sounds of the city winding down, the soft rustle of papyrus as you adjust the scrolls. It feels like the world itself has paused, if only for a moment, allowing the labor of the day to settle fully into memory. The last tasks of the day call for careful attention. You review the temple records one final time, ensuring that every offering is accounted for, every donation noted, every minor repair logged. Even small errors could ripple outward, creating confusion or misinterpretation. You trace your fingers along the neat columns, black ink and red headings, creating a visual harmony that brings a quiet sense of satisfaction. Historians still argue whether ancient scribes viewed their work as sacred ritual or practical necessity, but you know it is both. A young apprentice, eyes heavy with fatigue, approaches quietly, holding a shard with a recently completed set of glyphs. You glance over his work, noting slight imperfections, but also growth. "You've improved today," you murmur softly, tapping a small correction with a practiced hand. His face lights up faintly in the lamp glow, and he retreats to rest, leaving you with the lingering quiet and satisfaction of having guided another small hand toward mastery. Your mind drifts as you organize the final scrolls. You think of the day, the warm morning light on the courtyard, the coarse bread and beer that fueled you, the repetitive rhythm of writing, the squashed owls and crooked sun discs of the apprentices. Each moment, mundane in isolation, combines to form a tapestry of order and learning. The temple's needs have been recorded, the apprentices nurtured, and the flow of life along the Nile preserved in black and red ink. Evening cools the room, the shadows long and soft. You stretch your wrists and fingers, feeling the subtle ache that marks the completion of a day's labor. Outside, distant frogs begin their chorus, a gentle accompaniment to the fading bustle of the city. You imagine the river flowing steadily beneath the moonlight, carrying all the city's stories and offerings along its current. Your work, though stationary, is part of that flow. It preserves, records, and orders. Now, as the oil lamps flicker, you take a final glance at the scrolls neatly stacked on the bench. The apprentices are sleeping soundly, their small bodies rising and falling with quiet breaths. You feel a rare stillness in your chest, a sense of completion that comes not from grandeur, but from meticulous, patient effort. Every glyph drawn, every line measured, every detail recorded. These are the invisible threads that hold society together, quiet yet indispensable. You pause for a moment, letting your gaze drift to the open doorway, where the cool night air mixes with the faint scent of papyrus and dried ink. The city hums softly beyond the walls, a reminder of the broader world that depends, in small part, on the humble diligence of scribes. The thought is grounding, even comforting. You realize that though your life is quiet, repetitive, and seemingly ordinary, it is essential. Without these records, memory falters, offerings go unnoticed, and continuity dissolves. You rise slowly, stretching your shoulders and back, feeling the gentle fatigue of labor. The apprentice's soft breathing reminds you that learning continues quietly, even in sleep. You gather your tools, ink pots, reed pens, and the empty baskets used for scraps and broken ostraca. Everything has its place, and tonight it is all restored. The room, like your mind, is orderly. Finally, you settle back onto the bench, leaning against the wall, letting your thoughts drift. The flickering lamp casts soft shadows across the scrolls, and you imagine centuries hence someone discovering these records and marveling at their meticulousness. Perhaps they will notice your small humor in the margins, the gentle quirks of your ink strokes. Perhaps they will see only lines and columns, unaware of the life that flowed through each one. Either way, the work endures, and that is enough. The day's labor complete, the scribal house quiet, you allow your mind and body to unwind. Fingers flex and stretch, the tension of repetition dissolving slowly. Your eyes trace the room one last time, taking in the scent of ink, the soft textures of papyrus, the shadows dancing faintly in the lamp glow. A sense of calm, deep and pervasive, settles over you. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the soft hum of the Nile, the distant laughter of children, the gentle breeze that rustles palm fronds beyond the city. Each sound, each detail merges into a gentle symphony of quiet life. The apprentices sleep, the scrolls rest, and you let the rhythm of the day fade slowly into the night. All this work, the repetition, the small mistakes, the patience, it is not for fame or glory. It is for continuity, for memory, for life itself. You have done your part. The world outside will continue, and you have ensured that its story is preserved, ordered, and honored. The room grows stiller, the lamps flicker, and the night fully claims the city. You breathe slowly, deliberately, feeling each exhale release the weight of the day. The tension fades from your shoulders, the ache from your wrists softens, and the mind settles into quiet reflection. In this gentle pause, you find contentment, not in excitement, but in endurance, not in triumph, but in faithful labor, not in spectacle, but in the quiet preservation of life. And so you rest, knowing that your ink has recorded the rhythms of a world that continues beyond these walls, and that tomorrow the cycle will begin again, steady, patient, and enduring, like the Nile itself. The room darkens further, the lamp's glow fading to near invisibility. The scents of dried ink and papyrus linger, comforting in their familiarity. You lie back slightly, feeling the day's fatigue dissolve gradually into calm. Every glyph, every line, every careful stroke of ink has its place, and in this quiet, the labor of the day settles into memory like soft sand at the river's edge. Outside, the city hums faintly, but inside, peace reigns. You allow yourself to drift, thinking of apprentices learning slowly, rivers flowing steadily, offerings counted carefully. There is nothing more to do tonight, nothing more urgent than the gentle rhythm of breathing, the faint rustle of papyrus, and the lingering fragrance of ink. All is quiet, safe, and enduring. You close your eyes fully, letting the final shadows fade. The rhythm of life continues, Beyond walls, beyond scrolls, beyond ink. But your work has preserved it. That thought is enough. You breathe in slowly, savoring the calm, and exhale, releasing the day entirely. Fatigue and satisfaction mingle, a gentle lullaby for the mind. Your thoughts soften, images of the Nile, the city, and tiny owls drawn in ink glide past like slow-moving clouds. Each exhale carries reassurance. The day's labor is complete, and life flows forward, ordered, recorded, and remembered. Finally, the body relaxes fully. The mind slows, and a profound sense of calm settles into your chest. Tonight, all is preserved, all is still, all is at peace. End of script. Sweet dreams.